she did this from a place of deep hope. We see this because of the promise, the vow that she makes before God. That's how she says to God, God, if you'll give me this, if you'll give me the son that I've been praying, that I've been hoping, that I've been yearning, that I've been waiting, that I've been desiring for, I'll give him back to you. Nothing had changed yet at this point. Hannah was still very barren. Hannah was still very without child. She was in one of those very low, on the very deep end of deep and wide places. But she knew that God was a good God and a God of faith. God that would hear and answer her. She wasn't quite sure when, and she wasn't quite sure how. And so she makes this response of gratitude and trust. It's not a gimmick, and it's not some kind of line that she's throwing out to God. She's not trying to kind of hook and bait God with, well, God, if you'll just do this for me, then I'll give this to you. That's not what Hannah was trying to do. She was responding in a place of trust, of faith, and with gratitude deep in her heart. This really speaks to where her heart was, and how she was prepared to respond to what she trusted that God would do with gratitude, with thankfulness. She covers that depth of deep and wide in life. She covered the lament, the grief, the anguish, the bitterness of soul, but also the hope and the gratitude. And I think Hannah's very instructive to us about the nature of worship. And I think that she's especially instructive to us after the 12 months we've been living. We've been muddling through a pandemic, through so many other things going on in our nation, in our world, that it comes to the point where we might not even want to start to remember some of those things. We've lost a lot. We can see that simply by looking at how we have to rope off pews, how we have to have our trustworthy masks to take for walks with us. And there's a lot, frankly, worth lamenting and grieving and anguishing over. Not to just stay stuck and not to play woe is me, but to bring ourselves honestly to God. To name those things specifically that we're grieving, that we're lamenting, that we're anguished over. How it's changed how we can interact with one another and be with each other. I think that's one of the more instructive things about how Hannah laments in here. She gets very specific. She's not trying to just be general. She gets really as deep as she can with what's going on in the depths of her soul, in her own world. And when we choose to lament and grieve and acknowledge that anguish and work through it, it can be very transformative, like it was for Hannah. That gratitude can also be very transformative. Because I think that there's a temptation for all of us, I know it's a temptation that I face, to wait to be thankful or grateful until more things in my life look better, or more things in our world look better or the way that I might wish that they looked. I don't know about you, but I was very mindful of this yesterday. I spent a lot of my time yesterday sitting in various places in my house, in the parsonage, looking out windows, seeing the sunshine outside, the beautiful blue sky, and even some of the snow slowly melting. I enjoyed the fact to no end that I could barely see clouds yesterday. Maybe it was just the windows I chose to look out, but I didn't see many clouds yesterday. And I was mindful of this sermon as I looked yesterday. I was mindful of the fact that the pandemic continues, that many things in our world continue that caused me to pause and grieve a lot. But yesterday, at least in the depths of my own soul, I noticed that I was able, in the midst of all of that, to be grateful for that sunshine and the blue sky that I saw yesterday. Gratitude can be very transformative, as can that lament. This was also very true for a woman named Corrie ten Boom. She lived back during the Second World War. She was a very devout Christian, and she and her sister faced far more difficulties than I think many of us could imagine when she and her sister were confined to Ravensbrück, one of the most notorious Nazi prison camps in all of Germany. Corrie and her sister faced one special difficulty. It was a very terrible infection of fleas that was in all of their barracks. Thousands, they think, of fleas that infested their barracks. And if you've ever seen a dog or a cat or any animal that has a flea, possibly one or two, then we can probably only try and imagine how devastating an infestation of thousands of fleas must have been to Corrie, her sister, and so many others in their barracks. And while a lot of us, frankly I think myself included, would have whined and complained about the circumstances, Corrie and her sister were able to be grateful in the midst of this situation. And they were able to be grateful for the fleas. Not that they enjoyed them, not that the fleas miraculously didn't bite Corrie or her sister. They suffered as well as everyone else. But Corrie and her sister were able to be grateful for the fleas because with the great infestation of fleas, the cruel prison guards left their barracks alone. Nobody would come anywhere near their barracks, let alone get in the barracks besides those who had to be there. So Corrie and her sister, with all the fleas going on, and with all the separation that they were allowed, were able to conduct uninterrupted Bible studies with the other women, bringing many to Christ, praying with many of them, and sharing in the midst of their very difficult situation. Bless you. No worries. Corrie and her sister were able to do what is very hard. They were able to stay focused on the larger picture. They were able to see that in the midst of all their difficulty and struggle, that the fleas, as difficult as what they were, provided a unique opportunity. And so they were thankful for fleas. With the pandemic going for 12 months now, with so many difficulties arising, I think we need both of these, both lament and gratitude. And I hope that this week we may take the time to consider where and what we specifically need to lament before God, to share that anguish with God, and to work through that with Him. And I also hope that we'll take the time to consider and to pause, to look around, and to be mindful of where God has blessed us graciously, so that we too may respond with gratitude, with those blessings, the gracious ways that God has moved and acted. Knowing that we need God's help to do all of this, I invite you to turn with me back to our bulletins